this is like a post-pandemic edition. I think that's maybe John Lennon's bedroom, possibly, on Menlove Avenue in Liverpool. But we shall find out at some point. It's a lovely pic was created by Edith, Lady Londonderry, in the early 20th century. It has many idiosyncratic features, including topiary shaped into mythical Irish figures, a menagerie of carved animals, and a Moorish-style Spanish garden. Its sheltered position next to Strangford Lough and mild microclimate make it suitable for a wide range of plants. Lady Londonderry made the most of it, financing plant-gathering trips and ensuring her garden always contained the latest acquisitions. Mount Stuart still feels thrillingly original, and its gardeners continue to seek out new plant varieties to make sure her legacy endures. When I saw Lady Londonderry's garden, I was struck by its individuality and playfulness. It's the kind of garden that is so exhilarating it's hard to walk calmly around and give everything the attention it deserves. Instead, as you admire one area, you get a glimpse of something else which draws you towards it. It feels like it's in its own world. Gardens like this leave me full of excitement to create something beautiful and unique myself. On my return from Mount Stuart, I re-evaluated my own small plot and wondered what was realistic. I had recently bought my 1920s end-of-terrace home on the edge of a small town, and the garden had been rather neglected. My first ambitious plans were to terrace the site and divide it up into rooms, like a miniature version of an arts and crafts garden. But as I pondered on the space, I began to realise that not only were my ideas expensive and overcomplicated, they would change the character of the garden completely. I realised that if I paid attention to what was special about this site and its surrounding area, it could guide me to develop it more sensitively and bring its own particular spirit to life. I'd initially been drawn to the house by the rather wild garden and rural feel of the hillside it sits upon. The garden reflected its setting, with primroses strewn through the lawn, 2 cherry trees and mature ivy hiding the fences. If I called in the diggers to flatten the earth, I thought I would lose much of its essence. Instead, I decided to keep the slope, adding trees and shrubs at the bottom edge to frame the views of the hills beyond. I planted natural-looking bird-friendly native shrubs such as Established gardens like these have to work out the best way to keep their history alive without being held back by the past. For some gardens, ancient trees and historic border plans are critical to the spirit of place. For others, the planting can be more flexible. Rosie Files is head gardener at London's Ham House. Our philosophy at Ham is that a garden should not be restricted by its historic roots. But inspired by them, she says, our planting is always evolving to keep the garden's original spirit alive in a way that speaks to today's garden lovers. There has been a kitchen garden at Ham House since the 17th century, and it remains one of the most productive in London today. Rosie's team stayed true to the spirit of the historic productive garden, but have used modern organic growing techniques for the last decade to grow more unusual produce, including purple-bodied peas and roots such as salsify, skirret and scorzonera. In the summer, visitors can buy Ham House vegetable bags and cut flowers. At Backwood House in Warwickshire, the character comes from the property's sense of style. The mansion's last owner, Graham Baron Ash, inherited the 16th century house in 1925, transformed it to restore much of the Tudor heritage. In the garden, formal elements from mid-17th century, such as wrought iron gates, square gazebos, level lawns and a raised terrace, sit amongst bursting flower borders added over the years. Head gardener Mick Evans has made the borders even more of a visual. Feast than in Ash's day. Backwood's distinctive mingled planting style is largely defined by the use of colour and the way it complements the build's elements of the property, he explains. In the walled Carolean garden, we group small collections of intensely coloured plants along the length of the borders to draw the eye. In the central borders, we choose flower, leaf and stem colours to harmonise with the house's pinkish grey render. Elsewhere, the warm terracotta brick of the garden gazebos is set off with hot scarlet, gold and yellow flowers between dark red foliage. With this simple colour grouping rule in mind, the planting can be extended throughout the garden so that nothing will clash, instead embellishing this beautiful historic house. At Monk's House in East Sussex, the garden is far more modest and domestic, with a timeless quality to it. Leonard and Virginia Woolf bought their unassuming cottage in 1919. As an escape from London, it was generous and private, watched over by the steeple of the local church. The Wolves spent a lot of time in the garden, enlarging it and adding many new features, including ponds, conservatory, and brick paths built from the ruins of old buildings. Some areas were turfed over for ease of maintenance following Leonard's death in 1969, but a succession of dedicated tenants helped reinvigorate it. They peeled back vegetation to unearth the structure of the Wolf's Garden and replanted the borders with their own interpretation of a Bloomsbury-style garden. Today, the garden is in trust care, and gardeners try to give it the feel of a private space, with plants spilling over the paths. It is one of my favourite places, still providing an escape from the world, with Virginia's writing room nestled into a corner of the orchard. At the other end of the scale is the the 16th century, with dramatic Italianate terraces added a century later. It's thought to be one of the finest surviving examples of a 17th century terraced garden in Britain, and includes spectacular herbaceous borders, statues and an orangery. One of Bowers's most famous features is the 300-year-old yew hedge. Over time, the topiary has outgrown its formal shape and ballooned into something even more majestic, adding an organic dimension to the sombre Baroque architecture of the terraces. Lady Violet, Countess of Powys, managed the garden from 1911 to 1929 and intended it to be the best in Wales. Lady Violet's ambition for the garden gives me the guidance and inspiration to experiment with new plantings, says Powys's head gardener, David Swanton. It's what she would have wanted. Elsewhere, trust gardeners work to maintain some of the magic we dream of when we read about lost or secret gardens. Cork Abbey in Derbyshire is gardened gently, with some areas repaired and replanted and others allowed to get a little shaggy at the edges. The house is preserved as a fading time capsule from a vanished era, but mirroring this, in the garden is a challenge, as head gardener Heloise Brooke well knows. A garden cannot be left in aspic, she says. Nature will overrun it entirely, and it will become a mass of bramble, nettles and self-sown trees instead. Heloise tends the flower and vegetable gardens, but leaves the old vinery in evocative ruins. Moss on the roofs of garden buildings and flowering weeds colouring the edges of gravel paths. Gardens are all very different and very personal. They don't have to be fashionable or even colourful, and they certainly don't have to be perfect. Next time you visit a trust garden, or you're sitting in your own, see if you can identify its spirit. Sit somewhere quiet, look at the views, listen and soak in that garden's essence. What a special thing it is to become part of its layers of history and one of the stories it has to tell. So let's go back a little bit and have a look at some of these pictures. So this says Spirit of Trust Gardens. Borrow inspiration for your own green space from a trust garden. So the top one is Relaxed Spirit at Godolphin, Cornwall. Godolphin's Tudor Garden is one of the oldest in Truscare. It is a haven for wildlife and has a timeless feel, with primroses flowering among the cobbles and the lichen growing on tumble-down walls. Many rural gardens really suit this relaxed style, so don't be too quick to tidy up or fill in the gaps between paving. Moss and self-seeded plants can add character and soften hard surfaces, so weed selectively and allow some to flower and provide food for bees and butterflies. And then at the bottom we have Holiday Spirit. This is Overbeck's garden in Devon. That looks gorgeous. The magic of Overbeck's garden starts at the palm-clad drive and continues with views of Salcombe Estuary. The local microclimate also allows tender Mediterranean and Australasian flowers and plants to flourish, thanks to mild temperatures. If you're lucky enough to live somewhere very sunny and sheltered, you could try experimenting with more exotic plants such as the Canary Island date palm, crimson bottle brush, or passion flower, all of which provide shelter from the wind. If your garden is large and open or exposed, breaking it up into distinct areas with evergreen hedges can be very successful and make it far more inviting. Beech, yew, privet, hornbeam, and berberis all make excellent hedges which might provide nesting places for birds. And then this one is Cottage Spirit, Hilltop, Cumbria. Beatrix Potter's Lake District home has a lovely cottage garden with a haphazard mix of flowers, fruit, herbs and vegetables. Many houses suit a cottage garden filled with classic, old-fashioned flowers such as peonies, lilac and hardy geraniums. Ensure borders are nice and generous and far wider than the paths. Consider training a climber over the front door. And then this one, Urban Spirit. This is Red House, London. The house is far closer to the city than it was when William Morris commissioned it in the 1850s, but it remains a welcome escape from urban life. If you live in a town, take a tip from Red House's garden and cover your walls and fences with shrubs and climbers to blur the boundaries, give you privacy, and buffer the sounds from the streets outside. And then in this section, School of Gardening. Once you've identified your garden spirit, you'll need to know how to nurture it. Right plant, right place. Garden plants really vary in their needs. Most like to bask in the sun, but a few prefer to stay in the shade. Some enjoy moist conditions, while others won't survive a wet winter. Choosing species which are well suited to your garden's conditions will lead to luscious borders and plants that look at home. It also reduces the need for fertilizers, pesticides and irrigation. Treasure your trees. Mature trees and shrubs in a garden are a gift, filling the vertical space and adding personality. In towns, they also help to absorb sound, clean the air and cool the environment. Consider planting one if you don't have any. If a tree or shrub is too near a building or overhead wires or casting too much shade, consult an expert. Often sensitive pruning can manage growth. Making space for nature. Birdsong and insect life bring another dimension to a garden. Feeders and baths are obvious choices for drawing in birds, but you can also choose plants for pollinating insects. Create ponds for amphibians and keep decaying wood for beetles. Don't be too tidy. A few wildflower weeds can provide egg-laying sites for a host of moths and butterflies. Choosing a planting palette. It's a good idea to limit your plant palette to create repetition and harmony. 2 or 3 complementary colours will bring more impact than an unsuccessful jostle of different ones. Try to choose your colours with a setting in mind too, whether that be the brick, stone or render of nearby walls, the glaze on your pots or the foliage of shrubs and trees. Seating. Gardens are for enjoying, so do ensure your prettiest places have space for a seat. Sunny terraces may need tables and chairs for eating and entertaining, while a bench for 2 may better suit a nook with a view. In small gardens and balconies where sunny spots are at a premium, try a fold-away chair. Your furniture will become a feature, so choose it with care. specific.